Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Rachel was scrolling through her phone without really paying attention to what she was seeing. The house was quiet, the kind of silence that weighed heavily. Mark's absence filled the rooms more than any presence ever could. He was out at sea again, working on one of the gas platforms that funded the comfortable life they led. It had been a routine for years: airport goodbyes, short messages in daily life, promises of return that seemed increasingly distant from the emotional truth between them. Love, once light, was now made of obligations and absences. Rachel had gotten used to dealing with long days and nights without a voice. At first, she occupied her mind with books, TV shows, social media. But over time, the distractions lost their effect. She met Tyler during a trip to the gym. He had an easy smile, a carefree confidence, and no curiosity beyond the present moment. The type of man who spoke little and observed a lot. They started talking after a workout, exchanged messages, and before she realized it, she was waiting for him every Thursday like someone waiting for a relief for the soul. Tyler didn't ask about Mark. Nor did she talk about it. That was another life. Parallel. Without emotional involvement. A silent agreement of desire and escape. Rachel didn't love him. She would never consider leaving her husband. But there was something about that relationship that made her feel alive. During the meetings, she wore new lingerie, the kind she bought secretly and kept in a bag at the back of the closet, far from Mark's eyes. That wasn't about passion. It was about feeling that she still existed. She had always been meticulous. She chose strategic times, made sure to delete conversations, cleaned up traces with more attention than she used to take care of her own life. She avoided using perfume, washed her hair before Mark came back. In her head, everything was under control. Mark would never suspect. He trusted her, always had. And it was exactly because of this that she carried a weight she pretended not to feel. During the video calls, she faked interest, asked about the sea, about his co-workers, about the dangers of the operation. While he smiled on the other side of the screen, tired but relieved to see her, she disguised her guilt in rehearsed expressions. It was like living in two worlds, the marriage she still wanted to maintain and the impulse she couldn't suffocate. Rachel knew that loneliness wasn't a sufficient excuse, but it was the explanation she found when she looked at herself in the mirror. She felt empty. Tired of waiting. Of hearing the same "I'm almost coming back" over and over. Birthdays passed, important dates were ignored due to routine and distance. Mark was good, hardworking, honest. But it was as if he had forgotten that she also existed. That she needed to be seen, touched, desired. This eroded her in silence, without scandals, without shouts, without real escapes. Just the routine of always. The coffee in his mug, the affectionate messages by obligation, the solitary dinners watching shows he hated. Meanwhile, Tyler appeared as a break. An interval between guilt and indifference. Even though she felt emotionally disconnected from Tyler, Rachel clung to the temporary sense of importance. Those moments made her forget that in her home, there was a man who gave up everything for her, but who also no longer knew who she was. Mark was never violent, never insulted her, never treated her disrespectfully. But his constant and emotional absence was a kind of abandonment that hurt differently. The relationship remained standing on appearance, memory, convenience. Rachel didn't dare imagine what would happen if the truth came out. She believed, in a childish way, that everything would stay the same, that she could control the risks, and that the meetings with Tyler would just be a forgotten detail over time. But not everything could be hidden. And it was by mistake, a simple gesture, that the world began to crack. She forgot an intimate piece drying in the bathroom. One that Mark had never seen. One she had worn with Tyler 2 days before. When Mark arrived for an unexpected visit, tired and smiling as if everything was peaceful, that small detail made him stop for a few seconds. He observed, thought, and said nothing. Rachel noticed the quick look, but didn't react. She believed he would forget. Maybe he hadn't even noticed. They continued the night as if nothing had happened, but something was different. Mark stayed more in silence, observed the rooms, analyzed the routine. And, without Rachel knowing, he began to put the pieces together. It was the beginning of the end. And she still thought she had control. Rachel was in the kitchen, distracted by the sound of the kettle, when she heard Mark's voice. The sentence came sharp, without raising his tone, but loaded with intention. "Is there something you want to tell me?" She stopped stirring the sugar. The sound of metal against the cup ceased. Time seemed to freeze inside the house. She tried to keep her expression neutral, but her eyes betrayed a fear that Mark noticed before the answer. He had his arms crossed, leaning against the wall, watching every move she made. He was waiting for a confession. But she hesitated. Rachel asked why he was saying that. She tried to laugh, made a random comment to break the mood, pretended to be surprised, acted calm, as if she had no idea what he was talking about. Mark remained silent for a few seconds and then took his phone out of his pocket. He opened the gallery and handed it to her. The images on the screen were from the neighbor's house in front. He had requested the recordings under the pretext of investigating a possible theft. The neighbor, always helpful, gave them without questioning. In the videos, it was perfectly clear that a man was approaching the garage on different days and times. Tyler. Even though his face wasn't fully visible, the body, the gestures, the posture, everything gave him away. The recordings were organized, with dates and clear cuts. Rachel felt the ground disappear beneath her. Her face paled. She tried to say something, but her throat dried up. Mark didn't ask anything else. He just placed the phone on the counter. Said he wanted to hear it from her mouth. No detours. No excuses. No stories. Rachel knew the game of disguises was over. She knew that trying to deny or invent an alternative version would only make things worse. With teary eyes, she began to speak. Her voice was faltering, as if each word required effort. Admitted the involvement with Tyler. Explained it was a sequence of empty encounters, without feelings, motivated by loneliness, absence, neediness. Apologized. Tried to justify her actions with phrases she didn't completely believe. Said she didn't plan it, it just happened. That she felt forgotten. That she no longer recognized herself within the marriage. Mark listened in silence. On the outside, he seemed calm. But his eyes were red, not from anger, but from disappointment. When she finished speaking, he took a deep breath and said he expected to hear the truth, but didn't imagine it would go so far. That it wasn't about the physical act, but about the broken trust. About the fact of being deceived while doing everything he could to maintain the house, the future, the plans. Said he knew his job kept them apart, that he was aware of the sacrifices they both made, but that he never thought the abandonment would come in that way. She cried. Said she felt empty. That she was trying to survive a life where he only showed up in intervals. That every time he returned, she had to relearn how to live with him. And when he left again, the house felt like a punishment. Mark listened without interrupting. He just leaned against the wall and let her say whatever she wanted. When she tried to approach him, he stepped back. Said he didn't want arguments. Didn't want scenes. He was too hurt to continue that conversation. And added that despite everything, he still cared about her. Because of that, he wouldn't make the separation a war. He said he would leave the house the next day. That she could stay there until she sold the property or decided what to do. That he would take the minimum necessary. He only asked that she not try to reverse what had happened, because his decision was made. Rachel tried to argue. Begged them to start over. Spoke about therapy, changes, new promises. But he just thanked her for freeing him from the doubt. Said he preferred to deal with the pain of the truth than continue living an illusion. That night, they slept in separate rooms. Rachel barely managed to close her eyes. The silence of the house was the same, but now it hurt in a different way. It was no longer the physical absence of Mark. It was the definitive absence of the man who, despite everything, had always been emotionally present for her, even when he was distant. In the morning, he left with a backpack and a tired expression. She stood at the door, without saying a word. Watched his car disappear at the end of the street. And only then did she understand, with all the weight, what it meant to lose someone who was still alive, but had given up continuing. Rachel took weeks to understand that Mark wouldn't come back. His silence wasn't a pause to think. It was a goodbye. Time passed slowly. The routine in the house seemed bigger than before. Everything there reminded her of Mark. The toothbrush she hadn't had the courage to throw away, the blanket that still smelled like him, the sound of the lock she waited to hear even though she knew she wouldn't. During the day, she faked that everything was fine. Did shopping, washed the dishes, played music. At night, she cried. Not a loud cry. A quiet one, the kind that suffocates from within. She tried to call him twice. Sent long messages. He read them, but didn't reply. Called. Went straight to voicemail. She began to understand that forgiveness wouldn't come. At least not in the way she wanted. The sale of the house happened 2 months later. Mark didn't participate in the process. Said he would leave everything in her hands. Only asked that she be fair in the division. Rachel handled everything with a lump in her throat. When she finally handed the keys to the new owners, she felt something inside her break completely. That house had been built with dreams. There they had made plans, discussed names for children, chosen furniture, shared birthdays. And now all of that fit into boxes stacked in the trunk of the car. She moved to London with more fear than hope. She needed to start over, but didn't know how. She rented a small apartment near the subway and got a job as an administrative assistant at an insurance company. Nothing glamorous. Nothing impressive. But enough to pay the bills. The first weeks were tough. She was ashamed to talk about the past. Hid the true story behind generic phrases. The marriage ended, it was a complicated phase. People believed her, and she was grateful not to have to expose herself. Gradually, she adapted. Spent weekends alone. Read, walked, wrote in a notebook she started using as therapy. In it, she told herself the mistakes she had made and tried to understand exactly where she had begun to get lost. It was on a Friday afternoon, while delivering some documents to the legal department, that she met Andrew. He was a contracts manager. He had a calm demeanor, the kind of person who had already seen the whole world fall apart and still chose to smile. They exchanged greetings, sometimes comments about traffic or the office coffee machine. One day, she forgot her badge at the reception. He offered to get it for her. Their conversations became a bit longer. Nothing much. Just small pauses in the routine. She discovered that he was a widower, father of an 8-year-old boy. Told her he lived alone with his son since his wife died of a sudden aneurysm. Rachel fell silent for a few seconds after hearing that. Andrew, without realizing, stirred something in her. A kind of immediate respect. And at the same time, a hidden guilt. Because he talked about love with such truth that it hurt to listen. The conversations turned into lunches. The lunches turned into weekend outings. Andrew never forced anything. Never pressured. He listened. Paid attention. Cared for the small details. Rachel, who was used to shallow relationships, began to be scared of the depth of that affection. One day, she decided to tell him everything. Sat down with him on the couch and, directly, spoke about Mark, the infidelity, Tyler, the lies, the shame she still carried. Spoke about the pain, the regret, the desire to start over from scratch. When she finished, she expected him to stand up and leave. He stayed. Said everyone makes mistakes. That what matters is what we do with what we learn. And that she didn't need to hide her story to be worthy of a new chapter. That was like a forgiveness she never managed to ask her ex-husband. But now she received from someone who had no obligation to understand. The relationship with Andrew grew organically. Rachel learned to live with his son. Helped with schoolwork, went to school performances, prepared snacks for both of them. And without realizing it, she began to build something new. Not the same as before. But more genuine. Because this time, there were no masks. Everything was out in the open. Her past, his scars. And despite all the risks, they chose to move forward together. Mark rebuilt his own life without making a big deal out of it. After the divorce, he took on an administrative position within the company that had previously only seen him on the platforms. He wanted stability. Spend most of his days with feet on solid ground. He started attending corporate events, internal trainings, meetings with other executives. It was at one of these conferences that he met Samantha. She worked in operational security and already knew him by name. The connection happened naturally. First came the conversations about protocols and accidents avoided. Then, genuine interest. They went out for lunch, discussed ideas to improve conditions for the employees on board. Shared experiences and, gradually, confidences. Mark felt safe with her. It was as if, after so much time at sea, he had found an emotional anchor. The relationship evolved without turbulence. Samantha had a strong temperament, but knew how to listen. Mark, more mature and seasoned, began to value gestures he had previously overlooked. A note left on the desk, a question asked at the right time, a hug without reason. A year later, they married in a small ceremony. Few guests. Only close friends and family members of both. When Chloe was born, Mark found himself facing something new. It wasn't just about starting over. It was about continuing a story without the marks of what was left behind. Being a father affected him in a way he couldn't explain. He began to rethink time. Choices. Cycles. He no longer looked for answers in the past. He was satisfied with the present he had built. Rachel stayed firmly in London. Her relationship with Andrew was light but committed. Slowly, she stopped punishing herself. Helped his son with homework, organized weekly dinners, laughed without feeling guilty. It was a simple daily life, but full of meaning. She worked during the day, and on Friday nights, made pancakes with the boy. It was the kind of life she hadn't valued before. Emotional stability, presence, silent respect. Something she once had with Mark but let slip away because she didn't understand its value. And it was on a common morning, at a cafe in the city center, that she saw Mark for the first time in years. He was sitting at the corner table, with a folder on the table and a cup in hand. Wore a new ring. His hair was shorter. His expression, serene. Rachel froze for a few seconds. Andrew had gone to the counter to pay for the drinks. She stood there, watching her ex-husband like someone watching a portrait come to life. Mark also saw her. And with a slight nod, indicated the chair in front of him. She sat down. The initial silence was uncomfortable, but necessary. After a few seconds, they started talking. No demands. No resentments. He told her about Samantha. About Chloe. Showed a photo of his daughter on his phone. Rachel complimented, smiled, asked short questions. In return, she spoke about London, her work, and Andrew. She didn't give details, but Mark understood. And contrary to what she imagined, there was no irony, no anger. Just respect. Before Andrew came back, Mark thanked her for the conversation. Said that despite everything, he wished her well. Rachel fell silent. She watched his face for a few seconds. There was peace there she didn't know. And maybe for that reason, she felt like saying something more, but held back. Mark stood up, said goodbye with a discreet gesture, and left the cafe. Andrew returned with the cups and asked if she was okay. Rachel just smiled. That night, it took her a long time to sleep. Not out of nostalgia, but because she clearly understood that the cycle had ended definitively. That same week, an unexpected message arrived on Rachel's phone. It was from Tyler. Short, direct, almost cold. Asked if she wanted to meet. She stared at the screen for a few seconds. Deleted the message without replying. Continued folding clothes, with a calm heart. Because now she knew exactly who she was. And she no longer needed to lose herself to feel alive. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.